Hey guys and gals, welcome back to the show. So today I'm going to have to do a little improvisation here for you. So I was going to do a new watch unboxing for you today actually, and a little bit of brand history on a brand that I haven't shown on the channel before. I added a new watch to the collection, one that for the first time for me in a very long time was a purely emotional purchase. But my local post office has continued their trend of being consistently inconsistent, but being consistent and consistently letting me down. So yeah, it's 4 days overdue at this point in time already, so we're going to do something else. I want to answer some questions that I get asked all the time, and it's something I've never addressed before. So before we get started, as always, wristwatch check. Today I'm wearing my Rolex 16710 pre-ceramic GMT Master 2. I know you guys always ask me when it's on a Mr. Sailcloth strap. I know you guys always ask me, why can't we see it up close? You can. If you look down in the description below, there's a link to my Instagram where I post pictures of all my watches and all the watches you see on my channel, so good to know. But that's not what this video is about. So one of the questions I get asked from you guys all the time is, what watches are the best investments? What watches hold their value the best? Now, before I get into this, one thing I've made a video on before about why I don't think you should be investing in watches, which I'll put a link to here. Watches are not the greatest investment out there. There's definitely better ways to spend your money. So I'd watch that first. But assuming you've already decided to buy a luxury watch, congratulations, you're part of a group of us that love watches, and that's awesome. You can definitely spend your money wiser in certain places than in others. And there are certainly watches out there that you'll get a lot better return on investment than you would if you bought other ones. So, I'm a big car guy, and I always try to come back to these car analysis or car analogies and metaphors. And watches are very similar to cars. Every brand out there, has watches that, definitely hold their premium in the market and ones that kind of tank in value right after they're sold, much like a car would. If you're going to go to a Porsche dealership and you're looking at a used Porsche, a Porsche Cayenne is going to have a lot worse resale on it, than like a 911. The 911 is their go-to car, or any rare version of a 911 or any supercar is going to have a premium. A lot of their other cars out there, as good as they may be, the Cayenne, the Cayman, those are all great cars, don't get me wrong, but the brand is known for the iconic 911, and those cars aren't going to hold their value. Same as with Chevrolet. I'm a big Corvette guy. I love my Corvette. But my Corvette has a very different depreciation curve on it in comparison to, say, like a Chevrolet Malibu or even a Tahoe or a Silverado. Everyone is different. And, like cars, watches are the same thing. Brands are known for certain pieces, and those pieces have a lot different depreciation curve on them than some of the less known pieces out there. So I'm going to talk about 5 brands in this video. There's way more than 5 brands out there, obviously. And one of the brands I'm going to start off right away, I just want to let you guys, I'm not going to be talking about in this video. I may talk about it in a later video, is Panerai. Panerai has so many different things going on in their evaluation and where they're at in the market right now that they should be a video unto themselves. So I'm going to start with just 5 brands that a lot of you guys in the industry are going to know. I'm going to tell you the watches I think are the best investments in terms of holding your money, and as ones that you may actually even make a little bit of money in the long run. But again, no promises, and like I said, watch my video on why I don't recommend you invest in watches. But one of the first brands that we're going to talk about today is actually TAG Heuer. Now, again, I've made zero secret about the fact that I don't like them. However, TAG Heuer traces its roots back to Heuer, and Heuer has a massive amount of respect in the watch industry. So it should come as no surprise to you guys watching this that Heuer branded pieces, vintage Heuer pieces, carry a premium in the market. In particular, the one that is famous beyond all measure, which is the Heuer Monaco. Now, this is a piece that has always had kind of a cult following. It's been famously featured in all sorts of pop culture and movies, and it's an icon. And obviously TAG Heuer is creating it to this day, and they've gone through multiple iterations of it. But as with any watch, the one that's purest to form of the original is the one that's gonna have the best value. So vintage Heuer Monacos have a massive premium in the market. They're extremely collectible, and those watches tend to maintain their value or increase in value quite consistently in the market. Now, vintage pieces, as with all vintage pieces, have their own hiccups. Those watches are not the easiest thing to service. They're not the easiest thing to find parts for, and they have their own headaches that come with it. But those pieces are reasonably good investments, if you can say a watch is an investment, which again, I would not. But as much as those are the watches I would invest in, a lot of TAG Heuers, honestly, you're not gonna get your money back out of. The best thing you can do with any watch in particular is, track pricing and try to get a sense of when it reaches the lowest part of its depreciation curve. Back like cars, they start off at a new retail price. The first couple of years, they plummet. And after they've been in the market for 5 or 10 years, they usually reach the bottom of their depreciation curve. And if they're not really that special models, they basically stay there. And if they're special models, eventually they start to climb up again. Like right now, Rolex pre-ceramic models from the late 80s through 90s, early 2000s a lot of those things are fully depreciated. You know, a lot of the reason that I'm wearing those, like I have the 16710, is they're as depreciated in the market as they're probably going to get, and within a little bit, more than likely they're going to start to appreciate. So with Tag Heuer, you know, the vintage Heuers have already completely depreciated, and a lot of respects are going back up. A lot of the more modern iterations, again, it's kind of hit or miss, but the ones purest to form that look closest to the originals and more than likely made in the smallest numbers are the ones that are going to have their best return for you. You know, if you're looking to invest in a Tag Heuer and you're looking at like a mid-90s piece that's gold plated with a quartz movement, you know, it's never going to become a collectible piece. And just as a side note, always avoid watches, and this is strictly on a point of return on money. You know, obviously if they speak to you, go for it, but quartz watches and gold-plated watches have terrible resale and return on investment by and large. There's exceptions to this rule, but by and large, any of those pieces are not going to bring you your money back, so just avoid those, period. But again, if you're looking at a Tag Heuer, the Monaco is the one you're going to get the best return on investment. If you're looking at any other Tags, look for them to reach the end of their depreciation curve, which again is about typically 10 years in the market. At that point, you can typically pick them up for the best price possible, and you'll minimize your losses at that point. But unlike, you know, say the Monaco, more than likely they're not going to appreciate too much in value. So the next brand I'm going to talk about is a brand that I have a lot of passion for and a lot of love for, and it stems from my pure love of aviation. I think of this brand and I think of the Super Connie, the Super Constellation. Love that airplane. This brand sponsors one. There's also obviously nods to like John Travolta, who happens to own one of my other favorite airplanes of all time, the 707. His flies in Qantas colors. If you're really into aviation, you know I'm talking, of course, about Breitling. Breitling makes a multitude of watches that I personally really enjoy. I've owned, I think up to this point, 4 or 5 Breitlings. I've been very happy with all of them, and there are certainly pieces that are more well known for them than others. You know, pieces like the Colt and the Super Ocean and the Chronomat are always going to be very nice watches, but if you're looking for a Breitling to buy that's going to hold its value the best and may actually potentially give you some return on investment, those are probably not the watches you want to buy. There's one watch from Breitling that I think is a good investment. Well, I don't think is a good investment, but of Breitlings to invest in, if you're trying to protect your money, I think is the best one to protect your money, and that's the Breitling Navitimer. The Navitimer is Breitling. You know, they've gone back since the 1950s. When most people think of Breitling, they're thinking of the Navitimer. Now, I grant you some of their bigger pieces like the Super Avenger, those have very much caught on as what people think of as Breitlings. But over the course of history, the most consistently identified model with them besides the Chronomat has been the Navitimer. And if you look at resale watch values on Breitling, the Navitimer are always the pieces that tend to hold the most premium on the resale market and also tend to be the easiest ones to sell. A lot of these other special pieces, especially ones that are really, really large, they tend to be a niche market. I like them, but they're not as easy to sell. A Navitimer is a watch that has consistently shown that there's always an audience for it, and it's always been an icon of the brand. And again, like I just mentioned with Tag and with cars and anything else, wait till they reach the end of their depreciation curve. I think the sweet spot right now for Breitling Navitimers is the one that I've featured on the channel right now. That's the A23322, and watches before that I'd say from the 90s, early 2000s as well. Those pieces typically had modified value movements in it. They're really reliable, really easy to service, and they have really good fit and finish. Navitimers before that, you can get into Franken watches and they have other issues. They're good pieces, but you really need to know your market. But I think the 90s to 2000s, the pre-in-house movements, I think they represent really good value on the market. They're extremely well-made pieces, and you're getting all the panache and the heritage of a Breitling Navitimer. And again, the depreciation curve has happened. So I don't think you're going to lose a lot of money if you buy one, and you know, potentially, you know, 10, 15 years on the road, you may actually make a little bit of money on them. But those are definitely the ones that are easiest to sell. If you're out there now buying, you know, like a 1-year-old Super Avenger, it's a cool watch. I would wear a Super Avenger, but I don't know where that watch is going to be in terms of fashion or taste 15 years down the road. Whereas a Navitimer, I'm pretty confident it's always going to be a watch people are going to turn to and people are going to appreciate. So the next brand I'm going to talk about is another brand that I have nothing but admiration for. I've owned one, and I need to improve that number. I had a vintage piece from them in the Deco style. This is a watch brand that a lot of us in the watch community just have the utmost respect for. Every maker out there that has a lot of respect has used one of their movements at some point, including Patek Philippe. And they just have there's just so much know-how and so much passion that goes into their pieces, and the bang per buck, although they are very expensive watches, don't get me wrong, you get a lot for your money. And that brand, of course, is JLC LeCoultre or Jaeger LeCoultre, or however you want to pronounce it. It all depends if you want to go with the French, the German, or the Anglo-Saxon, or however you want to pronounce it. I always say JLC LeCoultre. You may vary, but you know, they have a multitude of wonderful pieces. I personally love the Master collection, also the Master compressor collection, you know, the Memo box. They have a lot of really, really cool pieces in their history. But as a Breitling in the Navitimer or a Tag Heuer in the Monaco, the one piece that everybody associates with Jaeger is going to be their Reverso collection. You know, it was designed for polo matches. It's of course the piece, if you're not familiar, that actually flips and it has two faces, or it may just actually just flip over to a solid back that a lot of people actually will engrave with their initials. It's a very emotive piece. It's a very vintage Art Deco looking piece. If you love Art Deco, and I love Art Deco among many things, it's a very cool piece to have from that era. It very much speaks to a bygone era. You know, they have so many different iterations of it. There's, of course, you can go up to a tourbillon, which is, you know, obviously a crazy complication that's very expensive, but you can do just a basic one-sided one, again, with a stainless steel back on it. There's the duo where they have two faces on it, which is super, super cool. That's on my list to buy at some point. I'd love to be sitting all day flipping the faces back and forth. There's just so many different ways you can go with them. You want a moon phase? Do you want a power reserve? Do you want something just basic? Do you want stainless steel? Do you want 18 karat gold? That is the watch that Jaeger is known for. And if you're gonna buy a Jaeger LeCoultre and you want to have the best money retention from the brand, the Reverso line is the way to go. And you're gonna wanna go for the more traditional pieces. I personally really like the Squadra, but as Reversos go, the standard case, the Grand Taille or Grand Taille case, however you wanna say it, is of course the traditional style case, and that's gonna be the one that's gonna have the best retention of value on it. Traditionally, a lot of watches do better in stainless, and I would say Jaeger tends to farm that way too with the Reverso, but some of the 18 karat gold pieces, if bought right too, can hold their value pretty well. And again, they're just incredible pieces, and if you're looking for something to buy that's gonna hold your money the best from Jaeger, the Reverso is the way to go. It's the icon of their brand. It's a fantastic piece. It's a versatile piece. It comes in all sorts of complications that you can appreciate, and it's always gonna be in style, and anybody that appreciates watches is gonna recognize it on your wrist and is gonna give you a thumbs up for it, which on my side of the world still means something positive. I know thumbs up can be negative depending on where you're watching me from. So the next brand we're gonna talk about is Omega. Now, I love Omega. As you guys know, if you've been watching my channel for a while, I own a Speedmaster Bond. That is not the watch actually I would recommend, and I'll get into that in a sec. I love that watch. That was an emotional purchase for me. I bought it because I loved Pierce Brosnan era Bond movies. That's when I grew up. I was born in the late 80s. He was my Bond. I know a lot of you guys that are younger than me grew up with Daniel Craig, who I also think is tremendous. And of course, the Planet Ocean is to Daniel Craig what my Seamaster Professional is to my Bond era. And if you go back, obviously you're more of a Rolex Submariner guy. You may have been in the Seiko era too. I mean, Bond's worn a multitude of pieces, but Omega, the one watch that is the Reverso to Jaeger or the Navitimer to Breitling, for Omega it's always been the Speedmaster. Wow, Anthony, the Speedmaster. And of course, not just the Speedmaster Moon watch. So I think one of the things that Omega has potentially done wrong, and one of the things I think Rolex does really well, which I'll get into, is Omega, which I appreciate, has done a lot of variations. They've been kind of consistently inconsistent, and that they've done a multitude of pieces across the gamut, and they're constantly coming out with new editions and special editions and changing it all up. And the good and the bad news of it is obviously we get a lot of great variety, and there's so many different takes on the Omega style on the market that you can definitely find something that speaks to you. But a lot of those pieces end up not having great resale on the secondhand market. But the one piece that's always stood the test of time, the one that, unless you believe in conspiracy theories, is the first watch ever worn on the moon. And that, of course, is, again, as I just mentioned, the Omega Speedmaster Man on the Moon watch, as some people would call it. You know, it's a beautiful classic Lamania-based caliber, manual wind, because again, a rotor would have had issues in a low gravity environment. It's a timeless piece. The Lamania movement of which it's based, and there's been a couple cals like the 321 of it, is known to be one of the best mechanical chronograph movements ever. And there's a lot of other manufacturers out there that continue to this day to take that base movement and to decorate it into Geneva steel quality. The movement itself is a piece of history. The watch itself is a piece of history. The style is as fresh today in my mind as it was when it first came out. And that is a watch that always commands a good value on the market. Now, I know there's also some other Speedmasters out there. They've done a multitude of special editions, like the Dark Side of the Moon. Some of these other ones are out right now. I really like those. I don't really know what those are gonna do long term. To me, if you're gonna buy a Speedmaster, the one that's gonna have the best resale for you is gonna be the original Moon watch. And there's also the Speedmaster Reduced. I've owned a couple of those as well. Those definitely have a very different market and a much reduced market than the Speedmaster Original Professional does. So again, it's an icon. There's a bunch of other Omegas out there, but if you're looking for return on investment, you know, the Constellation has a cool line. You know, there's so many cool lines. Again, I love the Seamasters, I mean, the Planet Oceans, and they tend to do okay. And if you buy them at the end of their depreciation curve, you're probably gonna minimize your loss. But who really knows how they're going to do in the long-term future? I really don't know. You know, the Seamaster could end up being a collectible one day, but I really don't know. The ones from the 60s don't have much value to them. Actually, they're a great buy in the secondhand market, as are older constellations from the 60s and 70s, the Omega Geneve line as well, because they're so affordable. But the Speedmaster, I think, is a watch you're not only going to get your money back out of, that if you buy a good piece from a good era with a good movement and good working condition, I wouldn't be surprised if you end up making some money out in the long run. Again, I'm not recommending it as an investment, but if you want to protect your money, that's the way to go. So the last piece I'm going to talk about today, or last company I'm going to talk about today, is Rolex. Now, Rolex is a brand that I actually think there's more than just one model that's actually collector worthy. Rolex, the one thing they do really well that a lot of people fault them for, and to each their own, is that they're very consistent in their design language. You know, a lot of people complain like the Porsche 911 designers are the laziest designers of all time because they just keep redoing a new version of the same car. Corvettes were accused of doing the same thing for many, many years too. But I think when you do that, you build a brand, you build an identity, and people fall in love with a shape and with a style, and they very much relate to it. And Rolex has done a tremendous job of being very consistent to their original brand language. You know, just as the Reverso has stayed pretty consistent with Jaeger, Rolex's Oyster line of watches have been very consistent, and I think not only do they keep the demand up, but it also helps assure that used market prices on their watches tend to do very well. The only real Rolexes that I think happen to be pretty bad return on investment would be the Cellini line. I like the Cellini line a lot, especially the Cellini prints, but because it's so outside of their normal design language, those just don't tend to do very well in the secondhand market. But of the Oysters, there's some that do much better than others. You know, there's always going to be people looking for Datejust. There's always going to be people looking for Presidents, and they do well. You know, the Explorer as well. There's some great pieces out there. You know, the Mule God does okay, and those pieces are all wonderful. But the ones that tend to do the best in Rolex world are sport models and stainless steel. And you know, the Daytona, which I've owned, it's on my channel. The Submariner, which I've owned, is on my channel. Those two pieces in particular, and I'd say I'd add the Sea Dweller to some extent on that now. The Sea Dweller was kind of an odd piece for a while, but now with the Deep Sea and some other stuff, they've definitely built up a little bit more of a following for that piece as well. But the Sub and the Daytona have always been icons, at least in my lifetime, and they tend to hold their value extremely well. And the other couple pieces, of course, are the other Sportline models, you know, like the GMT Master and the Explorer 2 I would talk about, but they've been kind of recent trends. I mean, they've always held their value okay, but if anything, they were underpriced on the market for many, many years. I would say the Explorer 2 is still underpriced for what it's worth. The GMT Masters recently got some love. Surprisingly, it's taken that long. I actually prefer the GMT Master to the Submariner, but when people think of Rolex, they think of the icons of Rolex, they think Sub. And in terms of sport watches, and they think of the Daytona. You know, the Sub is something that James Bond wore for many years as well. It's an icon. Everybody knows what a Rolex Submariner is. A lot of people, the Submariner is their first Rolex unless they buy a Datejust. So if you're looking for a sports watch, more than likely you've considered a Rolex Submariner as your first luxury watch. And you can't really go wrong with it. As with any of the watches I've talked about, buy at the good time to buy them, buy at the end of that appreciation curve. Sport model watches from Rolex, as I say as I make this video now, I think the best bang per buck are watches from the late 80s through 90s and the early 2000s, the ceramic, the pre-ceramic ones like the one I have here, although the 16710 values have gone up a little bit. Those watches to me have still kind of bottomed out or are slowly starting to creep up, but they still have a lot of room to grow. Ones from the early 80s and the 70s, those ones have already started to appreciate tremendously. And in my mind, the ceramics have yet to really finish the end of their depreciation curve. To me, they're still coming down. I wouldn't be investing in a new ceramic at this point, although I do think the ceramic current line Rolexes are leaps and bounds better watches than the pre-ceramics. From an investment perspective, I wouldn't put my money there just yet. But again, this is just my opinion. You guys are welcome to disagree. This is just based on my experience, which your experience may vary. But one other thing I'd like to warn about too, and I've mentioned this in previous videos, is be careful when things are trending really high. Like the Daytonas, you know, the generation that I own with the 4130, the first year of the in-house, those things were really, really popular for a really long time. And I got my money back out of mine when I sold it. But then when they came out with the ceramic bezel, my generation tanked in value, and the previous generation, the Zeniths, all of a sudden started shooting up. So if I would have been, you know, buying like my generation now, the new market prices are still basically the same, but on the used market, they're worth a lot less money if I want to sell it off to a dealer, per se. And the ceramics right now, in my mind, are massively overpriced. And if you buy one and you plan to keep it for more than 5 or 10 years, I think you're going to lose a lot of money if you end up selling it in 5 or 10 years. But again, a Submariner, any of these watches have bought at the end of their depreciation curve, which is typically, you know, 5, more likely 10 years. That represents good value for money, and more than likely they're not going to hold that value, they're going to appreciate in value. So hopefully you guys found this helpful. As I said today, I'd really hope to show you a new watch unboxing, which I'll get as soon as my post office gets its stuff together. No offense if you guys work there. I know that the stuff I'm experiencing isn't your fault. But anyway, thank you guys so much for checking this out. If you guys are new to my channel, thank you so much for subscribing. My subscribing rate keeps climbing and I can't keep up. But thank you guys so much. Just a little bit about my channel in case you are new. I don't claim to be a watch expert. I'm a passionate watch collector. This is just what I do for fun. I love this. I enjoy this so much. I have a lot of watch knowledge, but I'm no guru and I will never claim to be a guru. If you're looking for like the definitive answer on everything watch related, there's other channels that do it better than I. I'm just a passionate collector. I'm sharing you my real life experiences and I don't edit my stuff out and I give it like it is. So thank you so much for tuning in. If that's something that appreciates you. Thank you guys so much for my video last week too. I got such tremendous support from you guys. As I'm sure a lot of you guys know, that was a very difficult video for me to make and I struggled a lot with putting that out, but the results or the response from you guys has been tremendous and I just appreciate it more than I can convey. So as always guys, if you liked it, please give me a thumbs up. If you haven't already subscribed, somewhere around my face, there's gonna be a subscribe button you can click on and I'll catch you guys on the next video. Hope you guys are having an awesome day guys. Take care.